Well, I think the slim down was said in a day when there were a few more people around to make that seem like a justifiable comment.
On a quiet morning at Buckingham Palace, the soft light of early day filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors and gilded halls. The palace was mostly empty, save for a few staff quietly tending to their duties, the echo of footsteps occasionally punctuating the stillness. Below the grandeur of the main staterooms lay a space few ever saw, the royal jewel vault. It was a place of calm, secrecy, and immense responsibility. Inside its climate-controlled walls, countless treasures of the crown rested in velvet-lined drawers, each piece carrying the weight of history. Among them, the Jubilee brooch waited, its sapphire center reflecting the light in a deep, calm blue. This was no ordinary jewel. Created in 1977 to mark Queen Elizabeth II's Silver Jubilee, and later enhanced for her Golden Jubilee in 2002, it carried the story of a reign, of decades of service, and of the monarch's relationship with her country. Princess Anne, the Queen's daughter, and one of the royal family's most trusted stewards, entered the vault with purpose. She wore no pageantry, no ceremonial robes, only the quiet authority of someone entrusted with protecting history itself. Anne had been visiting the vault often since her mother's passing in September 2022, overseeing the careful cataloging and review of the collection. She knew each drawer, each velvet case, and each jewel intimately. But today was different. Today, her attention was fixed entirely on one object, the Jubilee brooch. It had been a piece worn by her mother at moments that defined her reign, moments that were celebrated publicly and remembered privately. For Anne, the brooch was more than a jewel. It was a symbol of continuity, of responsibility, and of the future of the monarchy. In recent months, she had become aware of a quiet interest in the brooch from others within the royal family, including Camilla, the queen consort, who had mentioned privately that it would be meaningful to wear the brooch as a tribute to Elizabeth's jubilees. Anne did not dismiss the thought lightly. She understood why someone would value this jewel. But as she lifted it from its case, feeling the familiar weight in her hand, her focus shifted. This was not about personal desire or status. It was about the future. The brooch was meant to carry history forward, not to rotate with changing roles. Some pieces in the royal collection were public ornaments, shared and worn by multiple people, while others followed a more deliberate path, tied to the crown's succession and legacy. Anne understood that the Jubilee brooch fell into the second category. It was a piece meant to honor the continuity of the monarchy and to serve as a bridge between generations. As she held it, memories surfaced unbidden, her mother adjusting it before public appearances, noting its color, its weight, its balance, and its meaning. Elizabeth had always been precise about the importance of symbols and the lessons they carried. Anne felt the weight of that responsibility settle firmly in her mind. She did not need to debate or seek approval. The path was clear. This jewel, rich in history and significance, would not be assigned according to present roles, but according to who would embody the future of the crown. The decision was deliberate, quiet, and heavy with meaning. Anne returned the brooch to its case for a final moment, reflecting on the lessons it carried, before leaving the vault to begin the process of transferring it. The choice was already shaping the monarchy's next chapter, invisible to the public eye, but essential for continuity. No one else needed to know yet. The symbolism was stronger than any announcement could make it. By placing the brooch in the hands of Catherine, Princess of Wales, Anne was making a statement that reached beyond titles or ceremony. It was about the monarchy's future, the direction in which it would move, and the values it would carry forward. This was the first step in a quiet but decisive act, one that would ripple through the palace and eventually reach the public in ways subtle yet unmistakable. By May 2023, The time had come to act on the decision Anne had carefully considered for months. The setting chosen was Kensington Palace, specifically the Oak Room, a space filled with warmth, history, and family memories. It was private and personal, perfect for a gesture that was meant to speak quietly yet clearly. Catherine, Princess of Wales, arrived calmly, her composure reflecting the gravity of the occasion, even as no words yet acknowledged it. She wore a simple, elegant outfit, respectful of the moment and its significance. Beside her, Prince William offered quiet support, understanding the importance of what was about to happen. Neither needed words. The presence of both made the occasion meaningful enough. Princess Anne entered shortly after, carrying the brooch in a small navy velvet case. Her manner was deliberate and measured, the confidence of someone who had long observed the importance of duty and tradition evident in her movements. She did not make speeches or call attention to the moment. The significance was already present in the room. Anne spoke of her mother briefly, but with precision, reminding Catherine that Queen Elizabeth II's collection was never simply decoration. Each piece carried responsibility, purpose, and a sense of continuity that extended beyond the present. The Jubilee brooch in particular was tied to the story of Elizabeth's reign, to the milestones that defined her time as queen. Anne opened the velvet case carefully, revealing the sapphire at its center, surrounded by diamonds that reflected the light like tiny stars. Catherine stepped forward naturally, accepting the weight of the moment with humility and grace. Anne pinned the brooch to Catherine's lapel, adjusting it gently, a quiet echo of how Elizabeth herself might have done it decades before. The gesture was subtle, but filled with meaning, a signal of trust, responsibility, and the passing of tradition. Not long afterward, Camilla and King Charles entered the room. There was no tension, only acknowledgement of the unspoken understanding that had taken place. Camilla smiled graciously, recognizing the choice without objection, while Charles offered a small gesture of approval. The moment passed without confrontation, yet its message was unmistakable. The line of succession, the symbols of the monarchy, and the continuity of tradition had been reinforced in a quiet but decisive way. Catherine now carried the brooch, not as a simple ornament, but as a visible reminder of the responsibility she would eventually inherit. Anne had acted with discretion and authority, ensuring that history, duty, and symbolism were honored without drama or spectacle. In the weeks that followed, the significance of the transfer began to manifest subtly in public appearances. Catherine wore the brooch during a Buckingham Palace garden party in June 2023, a quiet signal to those who understood the history of the piece. Observers who knew the significance of the Jubilee brooch could see immediately that it had moved to its intended place. Its presence on Catherine's lapel was not just fashion, it was a sign of trust and continuity. Media outlets, royal commentators, and social media alike noted the careful placement, interpreting the act as a gesture of succession and a reinforcement of Catherine's role in the future of the monarchy. Subsequent appearances, including Trooping the Color and a state dinner at Windsor Castle, confirmed the placement further. Catherine wore the brooch with poise, each time connecting her public image to the legacy of Elizabeth II. Meanwhile, Camilla continued her duties, wearing other jewels appropriate to her role, demonstrating acceptance and stability. Anne's quiet action had avoided public drama, yet it had shifted the internal balance of the royal household in subtle but meaningful ways. The brooch no longer belonged solely to the memory of a past queen. It now bridged generations, linking the past to the future and signaling continuity to those who understood its story. Catherine, aware of the responsibility now symbolically placed upon her, carried the brooch not as a token of favor, but as a reminder of the weight of history and the expectation of duty. The choice made in a quiet room had resonated through the palace, reinforcing tradition and authority in ways more profound than public announcement ever could. The story of the Jubilee Brooch and its transfer carries lessons beyond the immediate moment of placement. Every jewel in the royal collection is more than a decorative piece. It is a symbol of continuity, history, and service. In choosing Catherine to inherit the brooch, Princess Anne emphasized that symbols are not tied solely to titles or present positions, but to the broader story of monarchy itself. The sapphire, deep and calm, framed by glittering diamonds, is a reminder of decades of duty, stability, and public service. It reflects Elizabeth II's careful stewardship and the continuity she fostered in her reign. By ensuring that the brooch now rests with Catherine, Anne has linked the future queen consort to that legacy, creating a visual and symbolic connection that the public can recognize and appreciate. At the same time, the quiet refusal of Camilla's claim illustrates that tradition and precedence can sometimes outweigh personal wishes or expectations, reinforcing the principle that the monarchy operates not just on sentiment, but on a deliberate understanding of history and responsibility. The public may never fully see the negotiations, the decisions, or the careful thought that goes into maintaining these symbols, but each act shapes the monarchy's direction subtly yet decisively. Through Catherine's public appearances, the brooch has become more than a jewel. It is a story told through presence and gesture, a testament to foresight, care, and the respect for those who came before. Its sparkle is not mere ornamentation, but a reminder of continuity, the responsibility carried by each generation, and the trust passed quietly within the royal family. Princess Anne's choice demonstrates her role as a guardian of that legacy, a figure who ensures that history is respected and the future is guided with wisdom. As Catherine moves forward, the brooch remains a silent but potent symbol of the responsibilities she will carry, linking her to Elizabeth II's reign while pointing forward to the monarchy's evolving story. Observers, both inside and outside the palace, may see it as a simple accessory, but for those who understand its history, it signals far more. A bridge between the past and the future, continuity over convenience, duty over preference, and the careful hand that shapes the monarchy, quietly but with lasting effect. This quiet act, unseen and unsung by most, shapes the royal narrative for decades to come. It reinforces tradition, highlights the importance of symbols, and reminds all who observe that power, history, and responsibility are often carried in small gestures, in velvet cases, and in the careful passing of treasured objects from one trusted guardian to the next. The Jubilee Brooch now rests with Catherine, carrying forward the story of Elizabeth II, embodying the weight of service, and signaling the monarchy's path in a world that continues to watch and remember. Its significance is clear, both to those who serve within the palace and to those who follow the royal family's story around the world. In the end, the transfer of a single brooch tells a larger tale of legacy, continuity, and the quiet shaping of history that the public may only see in glimpses, yet that defines the monarchy's character and its future for generations. As Catherine, Princess of Wales, continued to wear the Jubilee brooch in public, the subtle power of the gesture became more visible. Observers, both in the media and among royal enthusiasts, began to notice the careful placement of the piece. It was not flashy or designed to draw attention in a dramatic way. Instead, it spoke quietly of responsibility, continuity, and trust. The sapphire at the center, deep and calm, framed by its surrounding diamonds, reflected not only the light of the events Catherine attended, but also the weight of the history it represented. Every photograph, every glance captured by photographers, served as a reminder that this was not merely a decorative item. It was a symbol of legacy, carefully passed from one generation to another. At Buckingham Palace garden parties, the brooch caught the sun's rays, its sparkle subtle yet unmistakable. Guests from diplomats to longtime royal staff could sense the meaning behind its placement. Conversations hushed slightly when the brooch was noticed, and those familiar with royal tradition understood that this single gesture carried more weight than a speech or public declaration ever could. In these moments, Catherine herself carried a quiet authority, a recognition that her role was not simply ceremonial, but deeply tied to the monarchy's future. She wore the brooch not with pride or display, but with a sense of humility, understanding the responsibility that now rested on her shoulders. Her posture, her gestures, and even the way she moved through crowds reflected an awareness that she now held a symbol meant to bridge the past and the future. News outlets, though initially hesitant to read too deeply into such subtle gestures, began to comment. Articles highlighted the historical importance of the Jubilee Brooch, noting its appearances alongside Catherine's carefully chosen outfits and the occasions during which she wore it. Commentators described it as a signal of continuity, linking her directly to Queen Elizabeth II's reign, and suggesting that the transfer had strengthened her position as the future queen consort. Across social media, images of Catherine wearing the brooch were shared alongside archival photographs of the late queen, creating a visual bridge between generations. Many posts pointed out the careful timing of the brooch's appearances, noting how it coincided with events historically associated with Elizabeth II, such as Trooping the Color and traditional garden parties. Viewers recognized the symbolism without needing explicit explanation. It became clear that the Jubilee brooch was no ordinary piece of jewelry. It was a narrative, a story told through presence, gesture, and timing. Meanwhile, within the palace walls, reactions were more measured but equally significant. Camilla, the queen consort, continued her duties with grace, wearing pieces of jewelry associated with her role, including the Burmese ruby tiara and other historically significant ornaments. There was no public dispute, no tension in appearances, only a quiet acceptance of Anne's decision. This non-confrontation reinforced the idea that the monarchy was guided not by competition or personal preference, but by principle, tradition, and foresight. Staff members who had long served the royal household noticed the shift in roles and symbols as well. Footmen, housekeepers, and palace aides recognized the significance of Anne's choice, understanding that the brooch's placement subtly realigned the representation of the monarchy's future. In the corridors and service rooms, quiet acknowledgement passed between those who had spent years observing the unspoken language of the palace. Every careful movement, every choice of placement carried meaning, and the Jubilee brooch now signaled the direction in which the monarchy would move. This quiet signaling was as powerful as any public announcement. It reminded everyone, inside and outside the palace, that continuity, duty, and the careful passing of tradition were at the heart of royal life. For Catherine, the brooch was more than a jewel. It was a daily reminder of the responsibility she carried, the legacy she was entrusted with, and the expectations that would unfold over years, not just days. In private moments, she would touch the sapphire, feeling its weight, and reflecting on the generations of service it represented. She understood that her role was not simply to appear in public or carry titles, but to embody the values and continuity the monarchy had long relied upon. The brooch connected her, not just to Elizabeth II, but to the story of the crown itself, linking past, present, and future in a single, elegant gesture. In the months following its transfer, the significance of the brooch extended beyond palace walls. Royal historians, commentators, and journalists began analyzing the symbolism, writing articles and producing segments that explored how jewelry, traditionally seen as decoration, could convey deep messages about succession, authority, and continuity. Documentaries highlighted the careful planning involved in the transfer, emphasizing Anne's role as a guardian of tradition. Social media discussions became widespread, with users comparing archival images of the brooch on Elizabeth II to its appearances on Catherine. Many observers remarked on the intentionality of its placement, noting how even minor details, such as the timing of appearances and the choice of outfit, reinforced the message of continuity. The broader public, while less familiar with the intricate traditions of the monarchy, could sense that something meaningful had occurred. The repeated appearances of the brooch, paired with Catherine's poised and composed presence, made it clear that she now held a symbol of great importance. The story of the brooch also reinforced Anne's unique role in the royal family. She was not only a daughter and sister, but a steward of history, entrusted with decisions that shaped the monarchy quietly but decisively. Her actions demonstrated a clear understanding of symbolism, legacy, and responsibility. By choosing Catherine as the next bearer of the Jubilee brooch, she ensured that the monarchy's future remained tied to its traditions, while subtly guiding public perception without the need for fanfare or announcement. Beyond the immediate circle of the royal family, this quiet act sparked discussions about the broader meaning of symbols, duty, and authority. Experts explained that royal jewels were often more than ornaments. They functioned as markers of continuity, reminders of past reigns, and tools for shaping public understanding of the monarchy's stability. The Jubilee brooch, in particular, served as a visual timeline, connecting Elizabeth II's milestones to the evolving story of the crown. In a sense, it became a bridge, linking the past to the future through careful placement and thoughtful decision-making. As Catherine continued her public engagements, she began to embody that connection. From garden parties to official state events, the brooch remained a constant, understated reminder that she was now a key part of the monarchy's continuity. It was a symbol that required no explanation, its meaning understood by those familiar with royal tradition, and recognized subtly by the public through repeated exposure and contextual placement. The story of the Jubilee brooch illustrates how small, deliberate gestures can have profound significance. A single piece of jewelry, carefully passed, can communicate history, trust, and responsibility in ways that words or formal announcements cannot. Anne's careful decision-making, Catherine's graceful acceptance, and the subtle acknowledgement from Camilla and King Charles all combine to reinforce the monarchy's sense of stability. Even as public attention focused on more visible aspects of royal life, the quiet story of the brooch continued to resonate, reminding everyone that legacy, symbolism, and careful stewardship often operate behind the scenes. As months turned into years, the significance of the Jubilee brooch only grew. It was no longer just a jewel or a decorative accessory. It had become a symbol of continuity, duty, and foresight within the royal family. Catherine, Princess of Wales, now carried the weight of that legacy with quiet grace. Each time she wore the brooch in public, it was a reminder, not to herself alone, but to the world, that the monarchy was a living institution, guided by tradition, responsibility, and careful stewardship. While many observers might have noticed only the sapphire's brilliance against her attire, those familiar with royal history recognized the deeper message. The brooch was no longer an accessory of memory. It was a bridge to the future. Anne's deliberate decision to pass the brooch to Catherine had not been made lightly. She had understood that history moves quietly, often behind closed doors, and that symbols can carry more influence than words ever could. By placing the brooch with Catherine rather than Camilla, Anne had subtly reinforced a lineage of responsibility. The choice was not about favoritism or personal relationships. It was about continuity, guiding the monarchy toward a stable and predictable future. Anne, as the Queen's daughter and a trusted steward, had long been aware of the delicate balance of tradition and evolution. Her role in maintaining that balance was central to the royal household's stability. By transferring the Jubilee brooch, she demonstrated that the monarchy's symbols could be used deliberately to reinforce structure, prepare successors, and subtly communicate priorities to both family members and the public. Meanwhile, Catherine began to internalize the responsibility carried by the brooch. The moment she first received it in Kensington Palace had been private, intimate, and weighted with meaning. But its appearances in public events confirmed that the responsibility was ongoing. Each time Catherine adjusted the brooch on her lapel, she was not simply wearing jewelry, she was wearing history, duty, and trust. She was acknowledging that she represented not only herself, but also the line of succession, the values of continuity, and the commitment to serve the country with the same steadfast dedication that Elizabeth II had exemplified. Royal commenters began to notice the careful symbolism in Catherine's appearances. They remarked on how she wore the brooch during occasions tied to Elizabeth's own milestones, such as Trooping the Color, state dinners, and garden parties. Each public showing was deliberate, a carefully orchestrated gesture that emphasized stability, foresight, and connection to tradition. The media, social commentators, and royal historians began to describe the brooch as a visual anchor, a tangible representation of the monarchy's respect for history and its careful preparation for the future. Yet the story of the brooch was not limited to its public symbolism. Inside the palace, Anne's action had also reinforced a system of quiet authority and guidance. She had acted decisively but without conflict, demonstrating that stewardship of tradition required both judgment and discretion. Her choice sent a clear message. While public ceremonies and roles are visible, the decisions that guide the monarchy's future are often made quietly, thoughtfully, and with careful attention to history. Camilla, the queen consort, continued to perform her duties with dignity, understanding that her role did not include the transfer of symbols tied to succession. She maintained composure and grace, wearing other historically significant jewels appropriate to her role. Her acceptance of the brooch's placement reflected the subtle diplomacy and respect that underlie the monarchy's inner workings. No public confrontation emerged, and the palace maintained its air of calm stability, demonstrating that sometimes influence is exercised silently, without announcements or declarations. As Catherine continued her public and private work, the brooch became a companion of sorts, a constant reminder of what she represented and what was expected of her. In private moments, she would glance at the sapphire, feeling the weight of the history it carried. She understood that her role was not just about appearances or ceremonies. It was about embodying continuity, responsibility, and service. Through her actions, the brooch's symbolism expanded. It became a bridge between Elizabeth II's long reign, Anne's careful stewardship, and Catherine's evolving role as future queen consort. Beyond the palace, the public also began to understand the significance of the brooch. Its careful appearances in photographs, events, and broadcasts communicated a sense of stability and foresight. The contrast between Catherine wearing the Jubilee brooch and Camilla's other jewelry became a subtle narrative of continuity versus contemporary adaptation. It demonstrated that while roles may evolve, certain symbols remain tied to lineage, history, and responsibility. Scholars and commentators began to write about the importance of royal symbols, noting how even small gestures can shape public perception and reinforce the monarchy's legitimacy. The Jubilee brooch became a case study in how jewelry can carry meaning beyond its physical form, acting as a visual marker of succession, duty, and continuity.